In 1886, a professor cracked open a manuscript inside a Serbian monastery that nobody had touched in over 1,000 years. It was called The Book of the Secrets of Enoch, written sometime in the 1st century, and it contained a floor-by-floor account of one man's guided tour through 10 layers of heaven. Prisons full of chained angels begging for mercy, a garden where the tree of life burns with golden fire, beings so terrifying that Enoch's body stopped working when he saw them. But the 10th heaven, the one where Enoch finally sees the face of God, is the part that changes everything. The first thing you need to understand about this text is that it is not the same book as the more famous Book of Enoch. That one, called 1st Enoch, survives in the Ethiopian Bible and focuses on the Watchers, the fallen angels who came down and corrupted humanity. You've probably seen videos about it. 2 Enoch is a completely different document. It was originally written, most scholars believe, before the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. The original language was likely Greek, though that version is gone. The only complete copies that survive are in Old Church Slavonic, copied by monks in medieval Eastern Europe who may not have fully understood what they were preserving. And these copies sat untouched for centuries until a scholar named Andrei Popov identified one in a Belgrade library and published it for the first time. When that manuscript hit the academic world, it caused a stir. Because the cosmology it describes, this layered, structured, intensely detailed vision of heaven, lines up with ideas that appear in the New Testament. Specifically, the Apostle Paul's cryptic reference in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where he says he knew a man who was caught up to the 3rd heaven and heard things that a person is not permitted to speak. For centuries, scholars debated what Paul meant by the 3rd heaven. Where did he get that concept? 2 Enoch lays it out like a blueprint. And once you see the blueprint, Paul's words stop being mysterious. They start being terrifyingly specific. But this story doesn't start with theology, it starts with fear. According to the text, Enoch is 365 years old, lying in bed, when something happens that he can't explain. He feels a crushing weight of dread, a terror with no source, no noise, no danger, just pure existential fear flooding his body for no apparent reason. And then 2 enormous figures appear in his room. The Slavonic text describes them as beings whose faces shone like the sun and whose eyes burned like candles. Their clothing was covered in what appeared to be feathers, and their feet were the color of purple. These weren't the chubby, soft-winged creatures from Renaissance paintings hanging in Italian churches. These were enormous, radiant, and completely alien. They call Enoch by name and tell him to come with them. God wants to show him something. Imagine you're lying awake at night, already drenched in unexplained panic, and 2 beings that look nothing like anything on earth appear in your bedroom and say, "Get up, you're coming with us." That's where this story begins, with raw animal fear. And Enoch goes with them, because according to this text, you don't say no. But before the ascent begins, Enoch does something that most videos about this text skip over entirely. He wakes up his sons, he calls Methuselah and his brothers to his side, and tells them he does not know where he is being taken or what awaits him. He gives them instructions. Live righteously. Do not swear by heaven or by earth. Wait for me. And then he is gone. That detail matters because it means Enoch did not choose this. He did not meditate his way into a vision. He did not fast for 40 days on a mountaintop. He was lying in bed, terrified, and 2 beings he had never seen before took him. The journey through the 10 heavens is not something Enoch pursued. It is something that happened to him, and he left his family behind without knowing if he would ever come back. If you have ever been pulled into a season of your life that you did not ask for, a crisis, a loss, a transformation that ripped you out of your normal existence without warning, then you already understand the beginning of this story better than you think. They lift him from his bed, and the ascent begins. The first heaven sits just above what the text calls the firmament. In the original Hebrew of Genesis chapter 1, that word is rakia. It literally means something hammered out, like a metal sheet beaten flat. The ancient Hebrews did not picture the sky as empty space. They pictured it as a solid dome, a physical barrier separating the waters above from the waters below. And the first heaven sits directly above that barrier. When Enoch arrives, he finds something that looks less like paradise and more like a massive operations center. There are storehouses here, literal warehouses of weather. One holds snow, another holds dew, another stores the mist and the clouds that cover the earth below. 200 angels work in this realm, ruling the stars and governing the movement of the constellations. This is important because it reframes the relationship between the physical and the spiritual. In this vision, weather is not random. The stars are not just burning gas. Everything in the natural world is being managed, directed, maintained by angelic beings whose entire existence is dedicated to keeping the cosmos running. Think of it like discovering that the laws of physics are not laws at all. They're instructions given by someone, and someone is making sure they get followed every single second. And that connects to something you might be dealing with right now. If nothing in the natural world is accidental, if every snowflake and every star is being directed, then maybe the circumstances of your own life are not as random as they feel from the inside. The first heaven says the cosmos has a control room. The question is whether you believe your life is on the dashboard. But Enoch barely has time to process it before his guides take him higher. The second heaven is nothing like the first. It is dark, completely, suffocatingly dark. The text says Enoch saw prisoners hanging in this realm, chained in shadows, waiting for judgment. These are not humans. These are angels, fallen ones, beings who turned from God and were locked in a cosmic prison with no light and no hope and no way out. And the moment they see Enoch, they do something unexpected. They beg him. They plead with him to pray for them, to carry a message to God on their behalf. Because Enoch is human, and he still has access to something they've permanently lost: the ability to speak to God. That detail is devastating if you sit with it. These are spiritual beings who once stood in God's presence, and now they are so desperate, so broken, so cut off, that they are begging a fragile mortal man to pray for them, because they can't. Their line to God has been permanently disconnected. Now, here is where this text stops feeling like ancient mythology and starts feeling like evidence, because the New Testament describes the exact same scene. Jude, verse 6, says that the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. And 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4 says, God did not spare angels when they sinned, but sent them to Tartarus, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. Read those verses again slowly. Chains, darkness, held for judgment. That is exactly what Enoch sees in the second heaven, word for word. Both Jude and Peter are describing a scene that 2nd Enoch lays out in full, which means at least 2 New Testament writers knew this tradition. They were referencing a cosmology that most modern Christians have never even heard of. If you've ever been through a season where prayer felt like talking into a void, where you felt locked away in some inner darkness and wondered if God could even hear you, the second heaven reframes that experience. Because, according to Enoch, that feeling of spiritual silence is not just a human struggle. It is the reality of the second heaven. It is what separation from God actually looks like, experienced by beings who used to know exactly what His presence felt like. And even in that darkness, they still reach for Him through a human. What does that say about the value of your prayers, even the ones that feel like they go nowhere? According to this text, prayer is so powerful that imprisoned angels, beings far more ancient and far more powerful than you, will beg you for it. And then the angels take Enoch higher, into the third heaven. And this is where things get truly strange, because the third heaven is not one place. It is two. On one side, in the eastern part, Enoch sees paradise, a literal garden more beautiful than anything he has ever encountered. Trees flowering in full bloom, every kind of fruit hanging ripe and fragrant, and at the center of it all stands what the text calls the tree of life. The Slavonic text describes this tree in stunning detail. Its appearance is gold and crimson and fire. It covers the whole of paradise with its canopy. Its roots stretch down, the text says, all the way to the earth, to the Garden of Eden below. And 4 springs flow from its base, pouring out milk, honey, wine, and oil, splitting into 4 rivers that wind through paradise. 300 angels guard this place. They sing without stopping, and the text says, this is where God rests when He visits paradise. Now here is the connection that changes everything about how you read Paul. When he writes in 2 Corinthians that he was caught up to the third heaven and into paradise, he is not being vague. He is referencing a specific location in a specific cosmological system that 2nd Enoch lays out in detail. The third heaven, in this tradition, is paradise. Paul knew this map. He was describing coordinates, not poetry. And here is the detail that sent chills down my spine when I first connected it. The tree of life that Enoch sees in the third heaven, the one with gold and crimson bark that covers all of paradise, does not only appear here, it appears at the very end of the Bible. Revelation chapter 22 verse 2 describes a tree of life standing on both sides of the river of the water of life, bearing 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of that tree, John writes, are for the healing of the nations. The same tree, first mentioned in Genesis, in the Garden of Eden, described in breathtaking detail in 2nd Enoch's third heaven, with its roots reaching down to that same garden, and then appearing one final time in the last chapter of Revelation, still bearing fruit, still giving life. The Bible begins and ends with this tree, and 2nd Enoch shows you where it has been the entire time, in the third heaven, waiting. But the third heaven has another side, the northern region. And what Enoch sees there makes the second heaven look peaceful. He describes a place of darkness covered in murky fire, where a river of flame flows through frozen shadows. The guardians stationed here, the text says, have faces like extinguished lamps, and eyes of fire, and teeth bared down to their chests. Enoch is so horrified that he says out loud, "It would have been better if I had not seen you, nor heard about your activities." Paradise and damnation, reward and punishment, same heaven, same floor, separated by nothing but a boundary. What does that mean for you right now? Maybe this. The distance between the best version of your life and the worst version of your life is not as far as you think. According to Enoch, they exist on the same level. And the deciding factor is not geography or luck or circumstance. It is the direction you are facing. After the third heaven, Enoch is taken to the fourth. And the mood shifts completely. This is not about beauty or terror. It is about precision. In the fourth heaven, Enoch sees the mechanics of the cosmos, the paths of the sun and moon, the chariots that carry the celestial bodies across the ancient sky. The text says the sun's light is 7 times greater than the moon's, and that 8,000 stars move alongside it at all times. What's remarkable here is not the ancient astronomy itself. It is the level of obsessive mathematical detail. Whoever wrote this was not inventing fairy tales. They were attempting to describe a functioning system. Gates that the sun passes through. 12 doors for each month. A 364-day calendar with a quarter-day adjustment. This matches material from the astronomical book in 1st Enoch, which scholars have dated to the 3rd century before Christ. The text also describes the sun being carried across the sky in a chariot attended by fiery creatures. It tracks the sun's path through a series of gates, 6 on the eastern horizon for the 6 months when days grow longer, and 6 on the western side for the 6 months when days shorten. Each gate corresponds to a season. Each gate has angels assigned to it. The level of architectural specificity is staggering. Whoever designed this system did not leave a single detail to chance. And that is the real takeaway from the fourth heaven. It is not about whether ancient people got the astronomy right. It is about what their vision reveals about the character of God. A God who bothers to design 12 gates for the sun to pass through, who assigns specific angels to regulate dew, who calibrates the year down to a quarter-day adjustment, is a God obsessed with detail. That is a God who does not cut corners. And if that is true, if the God behind this cosmos cares about the angle of a sunrise, then the idea that he is careless with your life makes no sense. Your Monday morning alarm clock goes off inside a universe that somebody's actively running. The fourth heaven says the Creator sweats the details, and you are one of them. The fifth heaven changes the atmosphere entirely, and honestly, this is the one that haunts me. Enoch encounters the Grigori. That word comes from the Greek egregoros, meaning wakeful ones or watchers. These are the same beings described in Genesis 6 and expanded on in 1st Enoch. In the biblical tradition, these are the angels who descended to Mount Hermon, looked at human women and decided they wanted them. They took wives, they had children, and those children were the Nephilim, the giants. But 1st Enoch tells us something else about the watchers that makes the fifth heaven hit even harder. It tells us what they taught. According to 1st Enoch chapter 8, a watcher named Azazel taught humans the art of making swords, knives, shields, and breastplates. He taught them to forge weapons of war, and he showed women how to use dyes and cosmetics to beautify themselves. Another watcher, Semjaza, taught the art of enchantments and root cuttings, what we would call sorcery and herbal magic. Others taught astrology, the reading of the clouds, the signs of the earth, and the movements of the sun and moon. In other words, the watchers did not just sleep with human women. They reprogrammed human civilization. They gave us the tools for vanity and violence and the occult. They handed humanity knowledge that was never meant for us, and the world was never the same. And that is why their silence in the fifth heaven is so devastating. They are not just ashamed of their lust, they are ashamed of the wreckage. Every war fought with a forged weapon, every act of sorcery, every system of manipulation that descended from what they taught, all of it traces back to them, and they know it. So they stand in the fifth heaven, enormous and dark-faced, and they do not sing. But here in 2nd Enoch, Enoch does something extraordinary. He encourages them. He tells them to begin worshipping again, to perform a liturgy, to try to reconnect with the God they abandoned. And the text says some of them begin to do it. Think about what that means. An old mortal man walks into a realm full of ancient, fallen, supernatural beings who are drowning in shame for things they did thousands of years ago, and he says, "It's not too late. Start singing again." And they listen. If you have ever felt like your mistakes are too big for God to forgive, like you have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, 2 Enoch is pushing back on that idea hard, because in the 5th heaven, even the beings who corrupted an entire civilization get a chance to try again. And the invitation comes from a human, from someone just like you. The weakest creature in the room turns out to be the one carrying the message of restoration. The 6th heaven is different, quieter, more orderly. 7 groups of angels live here, and the text describes them as brighter than the sun. These are the archangels, the administrators of the cosmos. Some of them govern nature, regulating rainfall and seasons, and the growth of every plant on earth. Others record every human soul and every deed ever committed. A permanent ledger of every choice, every act, every moment of kindness and cruelty. And no, I am not making that up. The text is explicit. There are angelic beings whose only job is to write down what you do, not to judge it, not yet, just to record it. And this idea does not live only in 2nd Enoch. It runs through the entire Bible like a thread. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 10, the prophet sees the throne of God and says, "The court was seated and the books were opened." In Malachi chapter 3, verse 16, God commands that a scroll of remembrance be written in his presence, recording those who feared the Lord and honored his name. And at the very end of the Bible, in Revelation chapter 20, verse 12, John sees the dead standing before God, and he writes, "Books were opened, and the dead were judged according to what they had done, as recorded in the books." Daniel, Malachi, Revelation, and 2nd Enoch, all describing the same thing, a permanent record, a cosmic ledger, books that have been opened since before you were born, filling with the ink of every decision you have ever made. That is not a comfortable thought, but it was never meant to be comfortable. It was meant to be clarifying, because if every act is being recorded, then nothing is wasted. The kindness nobody saw, the sacrifice nobody thanked you for, the moment you chose the right thing when the wrong thing was easier. Those went into the book too. The Slavonic text also mentions phoenixes in this heaven, fiery birds attending the chariot of the sun. That is an unusual detail, and some scholars think it points to an Egyptian influence on the original text, a sign that this document may have passed through Alexandria before arriving in Slavonic monasteries centuries later. Whatever its origin, the 6th heaven functions as the engine room of divine justice. And knowing that engine exists changes how you think about what you did today, or what you are about to do tomorrow. And then comes the 7th heaven. This is where the text takes a sharp turn. When Enoch arrives in the 7th heaven, he breaks down. The Slavonic text says he sees the fiery armies of archangels alongside the Cherubim, the Seraphim, and the Ophanim. Those 3 names are worth unpacking. Seraphim comes from the Hebrew saraph, meaning burning ones. These are the beings Isaiah saw in chapter 6 of his book, the ones with 6 wings who cry, "Holy, holy, holy," until the foundations of the temple shake. Cherubim, in the original Hebrew, are not babies with wings. They are the massive, multi-faced guardian creatures Ezekiel describes in chapter 1. with the face of a lion, an ox, an eagle, and a man, all at once. And Ophanim comes from the Hebrew for wheels. Ezekiel calls them wheels within wheels, covered in eyes, spinning in every direction simultaneously. If you have seen those viral images of biblically accurate angels, the ones with interlocking rings and hundreds of eyes, those are Ophanim. And Enoch sees all of them at once. He's so overwhelmed, so paralyzed with fear, that his body stops working. The two angels who have been guiding him through every heaven so far have to physically pick him up and steady him on his feet. And then they leave. His guides, the ones who have been with him from the moment he was pulled out of bed, depart and do not come back. Enoch is alone, trembling at the edge of the seventh heaven, looking toward the throne of God, which he can see from a great distance. It is in the 10th heaven, still 3 levels above him. And this is the part that speaks to something deeply human. There are moments in life where your guides, the people who walked with you through every stage, reach a point where they cannot go further. The mentor who got you to a certain level but cannot take you to the next one. The friend who carried you through a crisis but does not understand the new thing God is doing in you. There is a threshold where you stand alone, and Enoch is standing at it. This is the moment when everything changes. Because from here, Enoch is no longer a tourist. He is about to become something else entirely. If you are finding this journey as fascinating as I think you are, hit subscribe. We cover the mysteries buried in ancient texts every week, the stuff that connects the Bible to questions you are actually asking. Because what happens next, in the heavens above the 7th, is where this text goes from fascinating to terrifying. While all of this has been happening in the lower heavens, 3 more realms have been waiting above, and the text treats them differently than everything below. They are briefer, stranger, and they have names. The archangel Gabriel arrives to guide Enoch now, and Gabriel takes him into the 8th heaven. The text calls it Muzaloth, and it identifies this as a Hebrew word. The root is connected to Muzaloth, the same word that appears in 2 Kings 23, verse 5, often translated as constellations or planets. Muzaloth is the changer of the seasons. It governs drought and rain and holds the 12 constellations of the circle of the firmament. The 9th heaven is called Kochabim. In Hebrew, Kochabim simply means stars. But this is not the same as the star management happening in the 1st heaven. The text says the heavenly homes of the 12 constellations are kept here. The architecture behind the zodiac, the framework that holds the night sky in place. You might be wondering why these heavens exist above the 7th, if they seem to deal with things we already saw below, stars and seasons and celestial mechanics. The answer tells us something important about how the ancients understood reality. In the lower heavens you see the workers, the angels doing the maintenance. In the 8th and 9th heavens you see the blueprints, the templates, the cosmic patterns that everything below is built from. And there is a linguistic clue buried in the text that scholars have puzzled over for decades. The Slavonic manuscript identifies these heavens by their Hebrew names: Muzaloth Kochabim. The entire document is written in Old Church Slavonic, but at these specific points the author switches to Hebrew and flags it explicitly, saying, which is called in the Hebrew tongue. Why would a Slavonic text preserve Hebrew words so carefully? Because the author, or the tradition behind the author, considered those names sacred, original, untranslatable. The Hebrew was not decoration, it was the real name, and the Slavonic was just the wrapper. That kind of linguistic care is a fingerprint of antiquity. It suggests a document that passed through Hebrew into Greek and finally into Slavonic, carrying its original vocabulary like a fossil embedded in stone. It is the difference between watching a clock tick and understanding why time moves forward. Down below, things happen. Up here, you see the reason they happen, and that shift applies to your own life in a way that is easy to miss. You can look at your circumstances, your relationships, your struggles, and see them as random events, disconnected from each other, meaningless on their own. Or you can start asking whether there is a design behind them that you have not looked high enough to see yet. Whether the painful thing and the beautiful thing are connected in a pattern that only becomes visible from a higher vantage point. The 8th and 9th heavens say the pattern exists. You are just standing too close to see it. And then comes the 10th heaven, Aravoth. That word comes directly from the Hebrew Bible. In Psalm 68, verse 4, God is described as the one who rides upon the Aravoth, the highest heavens. The rabbinical tradition identifies Aravoth as the dwelling place of God himself. This is not an invention of Second Enoch. It is a name that runs through Jewish scripture and tradition for thousands of years. And what Enoch sees there destroys him. The archangel Michael, not Gabriel, leads Enoch into the 10th heaven. And the text says that Enoch saw the appearance of the Lord's face. The description is unlike anything you have read in any religious text, anywhere. God's face is described as looking like iron made to glow in fire, pulled from the furnace, emitting sparks, burning with radiant light. And then the text delivers one of the most striking lines in all of ancient Jewish literature. The Lord's face is ineffable, marvelous, and very awful, and very, very terrible. That last phrase bears repeating. Very, very terrible. Not the gentle grandfather figure sitting on a golden chair. Not a warm light at the end of a tunnel. The face of God, according to the person who claims to have seen it, is terrifying beyond the capacity of language to describe. The Slavonic word used here carries the weight of something that overwhelms every category your mind can construct, and Enoch's body cannot handle it. God gives a command. He tells Michael to extract Enoch from his earthly garments. Michael removes Enoch's physical clothing, but what is really happening, the text makes clear, is that his humanity is being removed. His mortal body cannot survive the presence of God, so it has to go. Michael anoints Enoch with a luminous oil described as smelling like myrrh and shining brighter than a great light. And the text says that after the anointing, Enoch looked at himself and realized he had become like one of the glorious ones. He was no longer human. He was something else, something that could stand in the presence of God and survive. I mean, think about that for a second. This is not a story about a man who went to heaven and came back with a nice experience to share. This is a story about a man who went so high that his species became a liability, who had to stop being human in order to survive what he was seeing. And the thing that makes this terrifying is the implication that the God of this universe is so far beyond us, so radically other, that the gap between us and him is not just a distance, it is a difference in kind. We are not built for his presence. Our very nature has to be replaced before we can exist in the same room. But the text does not end with the terror. Because after Enoch is transformed, after he becomes something new, God does something astonishing. He speaks to him directly, face to face, and he reveals the secrets of creation itself. The text says God told Enoch, "I will tell you what I created from non-existence and what visible things I made from invisible." And then God walks Enoch through the process of making the universe. how he called out a being called Adoil from the invisible, a great light that carried the foundation of all creation inside it. How he commanded the light to break apart, and from it the visible world was born. How he separated the waters above from the waters below, and set the boundaries of the earth and the sky. This is Genesis 1, told from God's own perspective, to a man who is no longer a man. And the implications are staggering, because what it means is that the 10 heavens were not the final destination, they were the preparation. Every level Enoch passed through, every horror and every wonder, was stripping away a layer of his limited human understanding so that he could receive what was waiting at the top. Not just a vision of God's face, a conversation with the Creator about how and why reality exists. The 10 heavens are not just a map of the cosmos, they are a process. Each one removes something, a fear, an assumption, a limitation, until the person who arrives at the top is capable of hearing things that the person at the bottom could never have understood. And that might be the most relevant thing this ancient text has to say about your life right now. That the difficult things you are going through are not punishments or accidents. They might be flaws, levels in an ascent you did not choose, stripping away things you do not need, preparing you to see something you are not yet ready to understand. So what does all of this mean? Why did this text get buried for over 1,000 years? One theory is straightforward. 2. Enoch describes a version of the cosmos that the early church found inconvenient. Its angelology is too elaborate. Its cosmology is too detailed. It gives too much information about things the religious establishment wanted to keep mysterious. If ordinary people could read a roadmap of heaven, complete with Hebrew names and functions and floor plans, the gatekeepers would lose their authority. And the historical record suggests this was not an accident. In the 4th century, as Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, church leaders began formally deciding which books belonged in the Bible and which did not. Athanasius of Alexandria published his Easter letter in 367 AD, listing the 27 books of the New Testament as we know them today. Texts like 2nd Enoch, which had circulated freely among Jewish and early Christian communities for centuries, were not banned outright. They were simply left off the list, not included, not mentioned. Over time, copies stopped being made. The text disappeared from Western awareness entirely, surviving only in the Slavonic monasteries of Eastern Europe, where monks continued copying it, perhaps not even knowing what they had. But there might be a deeper reason than institutional control. 2. Enoch does not just describe heaven, it describes transformation. It says that a human being, a regular person with a family and a home and a bed he slept in, was taken from his ordinary life and changed into something entirely new. Not through death, not through some special bloodline or priestly authority, through a direct encounter with God that was so powerful it rewrote his nature. And that is a dangerous idea, because it suggests that the barrier between the human and the divine is not fixed, that the 10 heavens are not just a map of the cosmos, they are a map of what is possible, layer after layer of increasing revelation, each one more overwhelming than the last, until the person experiencing it is no longer the same person who started the journey. You started this video as a viewer. You have now walked, at least mentally, through the same 10 heavens that Enoch described over 2,000 years ago. You have seen the control room where the stars are governed. You have heard chained angels beg a mortal man to pray for them. You have stood in paradise and looked sideways at damnation. You have watched the watchers, the ones who corrupted civilization, weep in silence until a human told them they could try again. You have felt the ground shake under the weight of the throne room, and you have watched a man lose his humanity so he could survive the face of God. And if you step back far enough, the 10 heavens start to look like something else entirely. They start to look like a map of spiritual growth. The first heaven teaches you that the universe has order, that nothing is random. That is where the journey begins, with the simple recognition that there is a design. The second heaven confronts you with darkness and separation. It asks whether you will keep reaching for God, even when you feel nothing. The third heaven puts paradise and damnation on the same floor and forces you to choose which direction you face. The fourth heaven reveals precision, the painful, beautiful realization that God cares about details you thought were too small to matter. The fifth heaven deals with shame and restoration. It says, your worst failure is not the end of your story. The sixth heaven introduces accountability. Every act is being recorded, which means every act matters. The seventh heaven is surrender. The moment your guides leave and you stand alone before something bigger than you can comprehend. The eighth and ninth heavens lift you above your own story long enough to see the pattern behind it. And the 10th heaven is transformation. The point where you stop being who you were and become something you could not have imagined at the start. 10 heavens, 10 stages. And the question too Enoch leaves you with is not theological, it is personal. The real question is whether you believe the universe you are living in has a design you have not looked high enough to see yet, whether the things you are going through, the silence, the dark seasons, the moments of beauty that disappear too fast, are random, or whether they are flaws in a building so vast that you can only see the one you are standing on. Enoch went up, and by the time he reached the top, he was not the same person anymore. Maybe that is the point. If you want to see what the book of Revelation says about the beings Enoch encountered in the throne room, that video is on screen now. Subscribe so you don't miss it.